Welcome everyone. So welcome to this first workshop collaborated between Asian Theological Summer Institute and PANARAM, Pacific Asian and Asian North American Women in Theology and Ministry. So welcome all of you here. My name is Boyoung Lee, and currently I serve as the Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty and Professor of Practical Theology at ILEF School of Theology. But I hosted this workshop as a faculty member of ATSI and also as a board member of PANARAM, for which I serve as chair of the Mentoring and Education Committee. So this morning or afternoon and evening, we have a very rare and important but wonderful opportunity thanks to a very generous offer made by two of our best allies and colleagues. So first, let me introduce them, and you read about their bio and in our flyer. So first, Dr. Edwin Aponte is the Executive Director of Louisville Institute, and you know about Louisville Institute and the important works they are doing. And so Dr. Aponte is, not only currently the ED of Louisville Institute, but he's also one of the leading voices in Theological Academy, especially shaping Latinx theology. And he's also a scholar activist, and also have extensive experience as a faculty member and also academic administrator. And he has served as academic dean of multiple institutions before Louisville. And so he will share what Louisville offers, and also, entertain your questions, and maybe, offering some advice on what your application can be, how you can make your application a good application. Also, we are joined by Dr. Patrick Race of FTE, Forum for Theological Exploration. And some of you are familiar with Dr. Race. And so he's also well-known in theological circle and in also higher education. He's the author of the forthcoming book, The Purpose Gap, Empowering Communities of Color to Find the Meaning and Thrive. And then his first book, Nobody Cries When We Die, have stirred a lot of conversations in both academy and the church. So he currently serves as the Senior Director of Learning Design at FTE. His job includes overseeing Doctoral Mentoring Program, Doctoral Institute Network, and also various mentoring programs that FTE offers, including faculty mentoring work. So welcome, Dr. Aponte, and welcome, Dr. Race, and thank you again so much for your generous time that is giving you are giving to our ATSI and PANARAM alumni and current students and also colleagues. So we met to prepare, a little bit about today, and so we agreed that Dr. Patrick Race, or Patrick, will go first and talk about what FTE is about and what programs FTE offers, but also his advice and tips on applications to be a FTE fellow, or in general, how to make your grant applications strong ones. So Patrick. Oh, in the meantime, if you have questions, you can also type in chat box, but both Patrick and Ed present different programs that the both institutions offer. We will open up this Zoom so that you can ask them questions, but you can also write your questions in chat box as you come up with the questions while listening to their presentation.
Thank you. And it is so good to see so many friends on this call. It makes presentation so much easier when you like the people you're looking at on the Zoom screen. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to talk a little bit about FTE, the Forum for Theological Exploration. We've been around since 1954, been doing fellowships in ministry and the academy, and we're still kind of at that grant making work. So I'm going to share my screen. And my hope is that you get a little bit of a sense of who we are and what we do, and then kind of lift up the hood a little bit to say, if you're looking for grants and fellowships, to what you might need to do as you're navigating the grant writing process. Can everyone see that? Can I get some thumbs up? Yeah, if you can see it. Cool. I'm gonna play a video about our doctoral work. I need thumbs up too if you can't hear the sound when it goes. Y'all hear that?
My soul looks back, lest I forget. It is imperative for us to look back and remember the pioneers who came before us. In 1968, this country was in a state of turmoil, but those pioneers did not take cover. Scholars of color were needed to live boldly in that moment. So they utilized their gifts to educate faith leaders who would pursue justice and fight for equality. In 1968, we needed liberation, Mir Hurista, and Minjung theology. In that turbulent year, we needed womanist, feminist, and Latina ethics. In these critical times, we needed these ideas, but very few could publish. Because in 1968, there were only 18 doctoral students of color in religion. It was then that FTE pondered the question, how might we use our fellowships to equip and support scholars of color who could impact the generations to come? So decades later, FTE fellows, alumni, and partners continue to shape and innovate theological education in ways that would not have been possible without the courage and imagination of people like Charles Shelby Rooks, Benjamin Elijah Mays, Sharon Watson Fluker, Emily Towns, Daisy Machado, Justo Gonzalez, and Marcia Reeves. There are 18 times more doctoral students of color in religion than there were in 1968. The number of women of color who are students, faculty, and administrators has grown exponentially. There are numerous professional organizations and guilds that affirm the scholarship and expand the ideas of scholars of color in religion. 50 years later, we still stand in need of the bold and innovative voices of scholars of color. The world we know today is not the world it once was, and it's not yet the world that it's meant to be. So FTE invites us to build on this legacy. So the question now isn't, will we make an impact? But it is, how will our scholarship shape the next 50 years?
That's a little bit about the history of FT's fellowships. What I love about that video, or what it shows, is that our history goes back to that moment in 1968. That's the same year that Dr. King was murdered, assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Cesar Chavez launched his first hunger strike. And this is the kind of history that you'll see imbued in all of our writings and our thing. And that's important to know as you're thinking about grants, what the organization stands for. That's not just FTE. This is just kind of like when you're working with any sort of funder, what is their history? What are those foundational moments that you want to know as you're writing about it? What type of legacy they're curating and how you might fit into that story. So we do two kind of things. We work primarily at FT with young adults who are discerning and called to ministry. These are 18 to 35-year-olds who are typically pre-seminary. And we do that through a number of ways. We have events and resources, retreats for them. But one of the biggest ways is through these grants. So these are the grants that we offer on the ministry side. So if you're pastoring, say you don't want to go on and get a PhD, but you're pastoring, you want to fit into FT's work, these are some of the opportunities that we have here. Mentoring for young adults. Say you're working with a critical mass, you're in youth ministry or college campus ministry, and you're taking them out for coffee. Let us pay for that coffee. You know, you want to take them to go see a movie, let's pay for that movie. We have solid grants for you to actually do that sort of mentoring work that happens alongside. And one of the great things about being a part of say, that mentoring network is you get engaged with a whole bunch of other people who are in various programs across the US and Canada who are thinking about mentoring the next generation in a really powerful way. So you get your imagination about what programs and capacities are expanded, because all of these grants come with some sort of connecting tissue, whether that's an in-person event post-pandemic or virtual resources and convenings. Pastoral internships, that was pretty straightforward a year and a half ago, where folks would come in and you'd get $10,000 to have an intern or two help you with your ministry. That's shifted since the post-pandemic. I have pastoral interns who are social media pastors now, which I didn't think would be a thing, but they're totally a thing. You know, now that we are living through this pandemic and imagining on the other side what ministry might look like. Vocational resources. If you are working with young adults and who are helping form Christian ministry or teaching, and say you're writing a book or a curriculum or making a movie series. I have a group of young people who are making a documentary about their experience and their journey through ministry. They got $10,000 to do that through a vocational resource that we can then share to the broader community. And then, of course, recruitment for ministry. If you're doing direct contact with young adults, where you were personally doing it, you don't have to have an institution that does this. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be a scholar. If you were personally recruiting the next generation to be ministers, we have a grant application that's due February 15th for $2,000 to help you advance that work. So this is kind of our focus area when we're talking about bringing along that next generation of ministers. And then this is what we're really known for, is the resources for theological educators, scholars of color. So, man, I need to say to this group, you know, it starts earlier in the pipeline. We have recruitment programs. We work with 6 institutions, Pan Autumn being one of them, that are recruiting the next generation. They do that through inviting them to their guild meetings, to offering resources and support. FTE has done direct recruitment. So if you ever have a question, I mean, I'll pass my contact information. It's always available. But our big thing is really doctoral fellowships. And that's $25,000 for those students who are post-course work, a $1,500 travel stipend to help them get to their professional guild meetings, mentoring, professional development support through the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. And then this year we have an online component where we're bringing together faculty to really tell their vocational stories and help navigate the academy, which isn't always clear. If you're in your dissertation year, one of the other supports that we offer is a dissertation writing retreat, which is 2 parts. One is it's about writing. You know, you get to work with me normally in somewhere that's really cool and awesome, and think about the writing process and create the time and space to actually write every day. But then you also get your work looked at by publishing executives. So they get to see your dissertation abstract. They get to give you comments. They get to tell you, here's the potential publishers when you're thinking about turning this into a book, who you might go with. And so that's a really cool opportunity, at least on the fellowship side. If you're not post-coursework, if you just got into a doctoral program or you're in your first or second year, the professional development for the first and second years is to gain access to all that professional development with access to our faculty, our gatherings. That's still an application process. That got pushed back all the way till June because we've been trying to offer those supports in the fall, tied more closely to the main guild that folks participate in, which is ARSBL, in that annual meeting. When we have been in person, we've done it on the front end of that. Then recruitment and mentoring. One of the biggest components of FT's work is, I'll just start with the latter, mentoring. We connect all of our fellows and all of our first and second year students with a faculty mentor, typically who's in their field, to kind of journey with them alongside, you know, what are the challenges they're facing in their academic journey. And also they normally have a conversation with their advisor. What we found is, you know, the advisor can tell us a lot about what type of support that an organization like FT, which is not an academic institution, we don't grant degrees, can come alongside and support students. So for example, you will never hear out of my mouth any advice on what you should write in your dissertation. You know, that's your committee, that's the work of your institution, but we can talk about getting you the greater support so you can write, editing support, all that kind of stuff that is kind of ancillary to the process, but important for you getting it done. And then recruitment. Like I said, we work with a lot of different partners, but at the front end of ARSBL, we always do two things. One is our annual reception, which everyone's invited to, whether you're a fellow or not. And we've also been working with SBL around what do recruitment events look like at that professional guild meeting. So that way we get folks in the room to see each other, to say what's up, say hi. And we feel like that's really important, which is tied to this networking piece. Let me just be very clear. I was never a fellow. I feel very blessed to run all these programs and direct them, but I was never selected a fellow. The thing I benefited from most from FT in all of my doctoral journey, and still, is the network. So even if you are not selected as a fellow, my deepest encouragement is for you to stay connected to the network, because the mentors, the advisors, even as simple as like you're trying to publish an article or get that first book published or applying for a job. Our network typically has people who know what's going on. This is a small field. So being tied to the network is really, really important. And then we post a whole bunch of resources that, everything from a guide to doctoral education, which is free and available to kind of walk you through the application process of trying to pursue a PhD, to online learning resources where we have videos like the one you just saw, or vocational stories. I'm glad that Dr. Lee agreed to being on this. Her story will be up around how this navigation as a scholar in this era, how she did it, and what advice you might give for the next generation. I just have two slides here about general kind of advice around doing these applications, and then I'll take questions. When writing a grant and fellowship application, I cannot stress this enough. Read the request for proposals. Like, read the website, mirror back the language. This is not a vanity project for funders. It's just to show that as best as we can, we're trying to stay true to our mission and fund those things. I can't tell you, every single year I get 2 or 3 emails saying that FT is funding the wrong things. And no funder wants to fund that. We're not going to wake up and say, yes, you're absolutely right, let me change the whole organization. I'm kind of in between my board, between our endowment dollars and the application. And the best that I can do is write these kind of the words that you see on the website when you're about to apply, is my way of kind of helping you along to make the best case for your work at FTE. So read the requests, pay attention to the language. This next one, storied, specific, and strong. This might be unique to FTE, but I think it can be applied across the board. When you're asking for a recommendation or you're writing your essays, tell a story. Our readers, I don't sit on my selection committee. I outsource that, bring folks in to read these applications. They want to know who you are. And the way you stand out is you make a case for who you are individually. That doesn't mean just your work. My project is unique. Everyone is brilliant. That, the 100+ applications we get a year, these are the top scholars in religion. You're getting a PhD because you are excellent already. We know that, but we want to know who you are as well. So be storied. When we ask about your vocational journey, tell us about it. Like, tell us a story that makes sense. Be specific. Don't tell me when I was one, every year, like a little yearbook, when I was 1, when I was 2, when I was 3, when I was 4. Give me a great story about, maybe it was a mentor that like activated your call or told you to go pursue a PhD. Or maybe it was a question that just ignited in your mind as you were in pastoral ministry. You said, there's no resources for this, and I need to address that pain. So be specific when you're doing your essays, when you're asking for recommendations from advisors, and have them be strong. I can't tell you how many times the best recommendation letters are the ones where we can tell that the recommender knows your story, can name very specific things that make you unique, and use strong language. And what I mean by strong language, I don't mean like they are very smart or they're very talented or they're genius or they're brilliant. I mean, that's pretty much par for the course across all recommendations. What I mean by strong is this work is going to change the field in these number of ways. This person advances the work of Dr. Boyoung Lee because it takes that great corpus of material, religious education, and does X, Y, and Z with it. Have them offer you such strong recommendation, so that way the committee knows that you know where your work fits in the larger field. And then this is just a general one. Ask for all your materials in advance. You know, FT, like I said, we process over 100 applications on the fellowship side. You know, our February 1 deadline matches up with our grant deadline. We're looking at thousands of pages of materials as they come in right around February. We are not the courier service to make sure that your recommenders turn in their paperwork or your transcripts get in. Follow up with your folks, ask them early, stay on top of it. That helps us do our job well to make sure that your application gets all the way through and on time. These are sort of like my secret tips. Be kind. This is totally off the application. Be kind. This is, as I said before, a very small field. So conversation that, say, Ed and I are having about who knows what, contingent faculty in the US. And I start talking about some dean, and I get really angry about it. Guess what happens when that dean shows up on a selection committee for my application? They probably heard about it, that I didn't like them very much. So this is about, like, really in that network, being kind to everyone. You say, I wish I didn't have to say this, but every single year when we are going from 100 applications to 16, and in the Latino, Asian, and First Nation category, it's between 4 and 6 fellowships every single year. There are things that come up about who in that really small pool of 4 to 6 people that are totally outside of what was written on the paper because the selection committee knows who that person is, or they know their advisor, or they know their pastor, or they know their community. So those stories matter. So I would just say, you know, be kind, be generous to all the folks in our respective field. Be honest. You know, this is not just about your work, but about what you're doing in the world. You know, if you're saying you're connected to a scholar, this is probably the biggest one. If you're going to name drop in your application, make sure you actually know that person that you're name dropping. You know, our scholars do follow up. So yeah, I would just, you know, pay attention to who you're connecting yourself to and how you're presenting yourself. Be clear in your writing. Have someone else look at it before you turn it in. Be consistent. My favorite application I've ever read was my first year in. We had this was actually for a grant for the ministry side. We had a pastor say that their life call was to be a firefighter, but they wanted some money to do recruitment for ministry, but this wasn't really what they did. They put all this in their vocational essay. I can't help but say, like, that's really cool you want to be a firefighter, but if you're going to recruit the next generation of pastors, shouldn't you be really excited about being a pastor, not excited about being a firefighter? Like, I love firefighters, but this is about pastoral ministry. So be consistent with who you are all the way through. Make sure if you're applying for doctoral fellowships that your academic commitments, your writing, your reading, your dissertation, what type of job, how you present your field, all those things match up. You know, don't tell me you're an ethicist and then have a dissertation on biblical studies. So be consistent all the way through. Be thorough in your, if you're at the dissertation stage, we do have faculties who are experts in their field. And the thing they dislike the most is to see an abstract or proposal that is reflective of dissertations that have been written before. My line out of our history book is that when we got started in 1968, the catchphrase was, this is 1968, the Academy does not need another dissertation on Tillich. That's why we kind of launched into this. So pay attention to what you're writing and know how it kind of fits in the field. And the most important is be you. I mean, don't try to move yourself into what you think FT wants. Our committee can read right through that. Write about who you are. We want to know who that is, and we want to fund you and your journey. So be you. Be your most authentic self. Cool? Yeah? I know that's a lot. Fast.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. So I guess we heard that know about the institute if you're applying for FT, for example, know about their commitment, their mission, and then also reflect on your project or your application in the context of FT's mission and how you are fitting your project is fitting, and also be authentic to who you are, and also be authentic, build really honest and honest relationship with your community, including your advisors that has integrity, ethical and moral integrity. So Patrick, so we will go into Dr. Ponte's presentation to hear about Louisville Institute, but here one clarifying question is asked, whether FTA offers anything for international student, like a F1 visa status people.
Yeah, FTE is funded primarily by the Lilly Endowment, and our funding is restricted to U.S. or Canadian citizens or permanent residents. However, I will say that this is part of that network thing, that our professional development isn't limited in such geographic bounds because we're doing stuff virtually and our resources are free and online. Part of that is connecting to myself or our staff, Elsie Barnhart, who couldn't be here with us, because we can offer that sort of professional development and support for international students.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So we will go to Dr. Ponte's presentation on Louisville Institute, and after that, we will entertain all kinds of questions you might have, very detailed and nuts and bolts about applications and fellowships. So Dr. Ponte, welcome again, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. And let me start by talking about the mission of the Louisville Institute. Louisville Institute started its work in December 1990, so just over 30 years. And our mission is to bridge church and academy through awarding grants and fellowships to those who lead and study North American religious institutions, practices, and movements, thereby promoting scholarship that strengthens church, academy, and society, and ultimately contributes to the flourishing of the church. I want to echo my colleague Patrick's comment about mission. This is our mission, and this is what's shaping Louisville Institute funding. Our funding, and it has been for the entire 30 plus years, 100% of it comes from the Lilly Endowment. So the mission of Louisville Institute reflects the mission of Lilly Endowment and its religion division as it seeks to contribute to the flourishing of the church. Talking about the church in North American context, specifically, we're talking again about US and Canada. And we, particularly working with doctoral students, we push right up against the limit. So if you are an international student, but are studying at a university, a school in the United States or Canada, there is our doctoral fellowship that you can avail yourself of because of you being at an institution in the US or Canada. We have 7 active programs right now. I'm going to talk about some of them in greater length. Our programs are designed to try to reflect the arc of people who are called to be scholars of the church. And so that's why we have these different programs. And they have been shaped by the experience of Louisville Institute over the years. And if you go to our website, you see that we have a listing of discontinued programs. And I mention that is that we are always trying to be attentive to what it is that the church and academy needs. And if there are shifts, then we will drop one program and add something new. Let me say a few words about our doctoral fellowship. It is part of our larger initiative of the vocation of theological educator, in that the Dissertation Fellowship and the Postdoctoral Fellowship also are part. The vocation of the theological educator initiative basically asks the question, what would it look like if from an early stage we walk alongside people to help them in their discernment, in their exploration about whether or not they are called to be a theological educator. So Louisville Doctoral Fellowship is a 2-year commitment that we would make to you if you are selected. It does involve a small grant of $2,000 a year, but it's mostly a professional formation program. So we bring our doctoral fellows together 3 times a year in small group and a cohort group that you will travel with for those 2 years with a senior scholar as a mentor for you. But we also have a more fuller program of mentoring. And the intent is to provide you collegial support during your period of doing, still doing coursework, or you're preparing for your exams, everything right up to the time where you start doing the work on your dissertation. We have a program for those who have doctorate in hand, first book grant for scholars of color. We've have awarded over $2 million in this. And the intent is to support early career non-tenured religion scholars. And by that, it's religion scholars, theological studies. We think of this very broadly, with a grant up to $40,000 to complete a first major research project that will lead to publication. In essence, this is a funding to help you get a pre-tenure sabbatical. It's called First Book, but let me tell you the open secret about this. There are some schools, some universities that, let me back up. Everyone expects you to revise your dissertation and publish it. Some universities will say, well, of course you're going to do that, but they will not count your published dissertation, your revised published dissertation, as a first book toward tenure review or contract renewal. So what Louisville Institute does is say, okay, fine. We will fund you for your second book in that context, because it's the first book that your university will recognize toward tenure. Here is just to give you a sampling of some of the people who have received first book grants from Louisville Institute, and including Greg Ellis that we saw in the FTE video earlier. We're delighted that he could receive funding from Louisville Institute. Colleagues, I should say parenthetically that I am an FTE scholar. I received it while I was a doctoral student, and it was incredible. And not only the support back then, but the relationships that were established through FTE, they have continued to the present. And likewise, relationships that people establish as a Louisville grantee continue even beyond the publications. We also have a program called Project Grants for Researchers. This is for $30,000. It's on a focused project. It need not be a sabbatical project. It's something that sometimes people use the project grant for researchers for early stage of research and then come back later for another grant. And here are some of the, just a sampling of grantees who have received it, including our colleague, Grace Jin-Sung Kim, and her current project on Reverend Jesse Jackson, Theological Journey. And I think maybe everyone in this group knows that Dr. Kim edited the volume of Reverend Jackson's speeches and sermons. Project grants for researchers, again, $30,000. And while I think of it, as I mentioned, these different Louisville grant programs, you can make your budget, in this case, up to $30,000. My advice is make your budget for $30,000. All right, some people have made a budget for less, say $20,000 on a particular project. The selection committee reviews that, sees that this is a great project. They could use another $10,000, but they only ask for 20. And so that's what's awarded. So whatever the limit is, not only for Louisville Institute, this is an instance where you ought not to try to be humble. If it says $30,000, if it says $40,000, construct your budget for what is there. Sabbatical grants, this is to help people who are eligible for a full year of academic leave. It's $40,000. We recognize that in most instances, $40,000 is not enough to do a salary substitution for a whole year. But our experience at Louisville Institute is that it's enough to persuade an institution to give someone who's already due to receive a semester sabbatical to give a full year sabbatical with institutional support. And so here are just some a few examples of people who in the last few years have received sabbatical grants, including our colleague Jonathan Tam up at Case Western Reserve University, his project on Beyond Model Minority. Dr. Tan also received a first book grant from Louisville Institute. And I mentioned that because Louisville Institute, if you receive one grant and once you've completed the project, we welcome you to apply for another grant. And so this is different from some funders. So you successfully finish one. If you think you got another idea, come on back. We'll be willing to consider it. The Dissertation Fellowship, this is for $25,000 for 1 year. It's intended to help people complete the dissertation. We recognize that $25,000 is a limited amount, but the hope is that you will be able to put aside at least 1 or 2 of your 6 part-time jobs so that you can finish your dissertation within the year. We want you to get on the other side. So the requirement for this grant, this fellowship, is to finish the dissertation. That's it. And then we invite you to be part of the Louisville Institute's winter seminar, and I can talk more about that later if there's interest. There's, again, some examples of recent dissertation fellows, people who've received this grant from Louisville Institute. We are delighted to be able to help people in this way. The Louisville Institute also provides a postdoctoral fellowship, and this is something that is a salary stipend of $25,000 for 2 years. And the intent is this to be a visiting professorship at a theological school, college, university, an embedded divinity school. We are open to the placement. The placement is a negotiation. So if you are selected as a semifinalist for Louisville Postdoctoral Fellowship, we are in conversation with you about what type of school you want to go to. The part of the package that we negotiate includes health benefits, housing, full housing, and also Louisville Institute will provide up to $8,000 to help you to move to your placement site, on the assumption that whatever school you're going to go to is somewhere different than where you're finishing your doctorate. And here is a listing of some of our recent postdoctoral fellows and where they've been placed. Probably colleagues here in this Zoom meeting, you know some or all of these people. And I am quite willing to talk more about the Louisville Postdoctoral Fellowship. One thing I want to mention here is Louisville Institute over its 30 years has funded lots of research in religion that has resulted in all kinds of dissertation books, articles, and other kinds of ways where this research has been disseminated. If you are a Louisville Institute grantee, either through a fellowship or a grant, we want to help you get your research out to as wide an audience as possible. And so we will be in ongoing conversation with you about how to do that in many ways. This is a quick, I couldn't fill it up on one screen, but just some of the recent publications that have come out that have been funded by Louisville Institute grants. And well, let me put it this way. I bet if you go to in some books, the acknowledgement area, there's a good chance that somewhere in there's going to be words of acknowledgement and appreciation for the support of Louisville Institute. So Louisville Institute has had a big role in supporting religious and theological research in the United States and Canada, and we certainly would be delighted to help you in that way as well. I want to give you some recommendations about grant applications. This is from our experience. Certainly they apply to Louisville Institute grant applications. They will overlap with some of what Patrick said. I think they will also be applicable as you apply for grants from other funders. So don't pose a loaded research question. Don't assume in your research question that you already know the answer to your research. The selection committee sees that. I can say more about that later on if you want. Don't request funds to repackage and share what you've already learned. The selection committee sees that as well. These are scholars themselves. They read the materials in the application. They research the field. If it's something you've already done, the selection committee is going to say, well, why should Louisville Institute give you money for something you've already done, right? Don't request funds for basic operational costs. If you happen to be a member of a faculty somewhere or administrator, the grant proposal, the budget should not have something about your salary. Your institution should pay your salary. This is not the type of grant. There are funders who will do that. There are some specific caveats to this, but we can talk some about that. Don't request funds for a one-off event. Now, what I mean by this is some people will want grant money from Louisville Institute for bringing together a group of scholars to talk about a particular topic, and that's it. We at Louisville Institute are not opposed to the convening of scholars around issues, but we want to know what are the things that brought the scholars together and what's going to happen next after these scholars are brought together. What is looking into the future? And if that's not clear, we can talk some more about this. Don't try to cram all your big project goals, your big picture goals, into a single grant funded project. We understand that you may have a vision of what your career as a scholar is going to be for the next 40 years. Don't try to put 40 years of work into one grant project. Give it some thought and what this particular project might be in your arc of your work. And of course, part of the arc of our work as we go through our callings, our careers, is that things change in the doing of our work. Don't describe research methods in a single sentence like, I plan to conduct ethnographic research using mixed methods. I assure you this will bring eye rolling from members of the selection committee. Be specific of what your methodology is going to be, all right? Don't use excessive jargon. These are scholars reading your grant application, but they may not be scholars in your fields, in your disciplines. So give some thought to your possible audience and maybe do some of the translation work that would be needed. Don't assume institutional support. That is, if you are an administrator or on faculty somewhere and you think that your institution is going to provide you with a research assistant, just check that out and make sure that's the case. Don't assume that. And in the case of project grants for researchers, if the institution cannot provide you funding for research assistant, that is one item that you can put into your grant budget. Don't just ask anyone to write a letter of recommendation. This is a hard one because you have no control over that 100%, though you have some agency in it. Let me put this way, and we can talk more about it. We have seen in selection committees, and particularly, right, we get hundreds of applications for one grant program, and we got to narrow it down to a small group. And a very strong application with a very weak or inappropriate letter of recommendation. And that letter of recommendation can doom a grant application. Again, you have no control over what your recommender is going to say, but what this means is backing things up, to have some sort of relationship with the individual, and in most cases, this might be a senior scholar, to have some sort of relationship where that will be you can trust what's going to happen. And again, we can talk more about this. Don't procrastinate. All these grant programs have certain dates. Every year, I get a request from someone asking me to accept their application, even though we were past the deadline. And I politely tell them, well, you are welcome to apply next year because we can't accept it past the deadline. Again, all these attend, this is just a summary, we can come back to these. I mentioned about deadlines. Here are the deadlines for the current awarding year here at Louisville Institute. They have specific calendar years, but I want to emphasize it's the same month and date each year. So for next time around, cross out the calendar year. This awarding cycle, we still have 2 application dates coming up. And here at Louisville Institute, basically, we invite you to share your vision, and we hope we could fund your project. So I'll stop.
Thank you so much. So you hear a lot of resonance between 2 presentations in terms of recommendations. So there is a question from Dr. Stephanie Wong, whether Louisville's project only funds for North American context project. Now, my guess is yes, right? Because of Louisville Institute's to its commitment to church in North America.
So I've been executive director of Louisville Institute for 5.5 years, and I like to be open to creativity. So we have funded projects, for example, of a scholar who was, the focus of the work has been on, I think it was the United States missionary work in Korea in the early 20th century. And part of that research was informed understandings of US American evangelicalism. Right? So in that research, it was outside North America, but the connection was made back to US and Canada. So I don't know if that's helpful. So if you can do research like that, where, so for example, another current one, and I'll say this, our colleague Miguel de la Torre is a multi-year project exploring Jose Marti, the philosopher, poet from Cuba, and which involves a lot of work going to Cuba. But the impact of that research in Cuba has impact throughout the Americas, North and South America. All that to say, if you can make the case on how your research can have a impact on understanding Christianity better in the United States and Canada, we want to hear you make that case.
Thank you. So we heard the 2 presentations specific to Louisville and FTE, but also very much related. And as also I see some of the pictures of grant recipients, many FTE fellows also received grants from Louisville Institute. I think in this call, I saw Yuki Schwartz and April Junghyun and Hee-sung Hwang, who also received fellowships or grants from both. So if you can also share some of your experiences, what you made, what kind of efforts you made to be the recipients of these grants and fellowships. So that will be very helpful. So I know Hee-sung and Yuki are postdoctoral fellows right now. And I saw that April Jung-Yan her also received the dissertation or doctoral program fellowship that I saw the picture. So can I invite either Yuki or Hee-sung or April share their experience before we entertain other specific questions? I invite Yuki to speak.
Well, I'm really grateful to the Louisville Institute and both to FTE as well for the help that they provided me and the networking support and all of the workshop support that I've received from you all over this time that helps me craft that application. I'm a little different as far as the Louisville Institute postdoctoral fellowship goes because I was part of a second group that came in because of COVID, but I did apply originally to the fall grant, and I followed a lot of what Dr. Reyes had said about making sure that I made sure my application lined up with the goals of the organization, and made sure that when I was looking for applications for grants, that I wanted to make sure that my values and my goals lined up with what they were doing so that we could be in a mutually beneficial partnership. And also I paid attention to really making sure that I was telling the story of the research and the work that I wanted to do that was coming out of the questions that I had in my life and my context. This is one of the things that I really feel like makes why I've been so grateful to FTE in Louisville is to be able to stand in this wonderful community and know that the questions that I have are building upon the questions that have come before me, and that I carry on that work and I pass it on to the students in my life right now. And so just having that historical awareness and these historical relationships that go beyond who I've met, but can trace that chain of relationship in so many different directions. Both FTE and now through Louisville, I really feel so grounded and supported as a scholar doing in theological education right now.
Thank you. Hee-sung, do you want to share?
Yes, as a Louisville postdoctoral fellow, I'm really grateful for this opportunity that I want to say first. And the gem of it, as a second year postdoctoral fellow, the gem of it is an experience and conversation in our cohort meeting that as we are all going through the same stage right after graduation to the theological education, the sharing experiences and resources are really great. And also the mentoring experience at Louisville Institute Vocation for Theological Educator, that program is really an excellent. And also talking about the application process, I was just uh, saying yes and yes to the list of Dr. Aponte shared about the 10 don't do list. And one of the things I remember is that picking up the right recommendation people for my application process. And not all of them, but two of them shared what they wrote about me. And that also strengthened my vocation and my uh, call to be a theological educator. So just picking up, choosing the right person, a strong recommendators would be a really great thing to remember. Also to prepare my application package, I also talked to and consulted with many people as many as I could remember. Uh, so just don't write all the application material by yourself. Just to talk to other people who have some experiences and talk to other people who went through that and talk to your teachers and mentors, and that'll be really strengthen your materials to go through. Yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jonghyun, April, do you want to share, or shall we entertain those general questions?
I can share a little bit if that's okay.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
hi, my name is April Chongyun Her, and I've been a doctoral fellow, and now I am a dissertation fellow. And for this, I think I was incredibly lucky to be in that position. Like previous speakers said, I think what's really important is that I think you really have to find the connection, the common area of your interest and the interests of the Louisville Institute. And for that, I really planned ahead, like a year before, and really try to find what I'm really interested in and what Louisville will be interested in. So that making that connection while not losing your authentic interest and your authentic identity is, I think, really important. I just finished the winter seminar for dissertation fellows and other fellows who's in different categories. And that was a 3 days seminar. And through that, I get a really nice, really wonderful feedback from those who are accomplished scholar from different areas. So I've experienced that as a really enriched experience and really incredible time that's given. I think that's it for now. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk.
Thank you. I also know that Shengping, I met you as an FTE fellow, and have been in the program. You are now in like a writing retreat, all that. Can you share your experience? And then we will go to Dr. Race and Aponte for questions.
Okay, thank you, Professor Boyan. I just talk a little bit. Thank you, Patrick. I got the FT time. And I think I focused on my proposal easy to understand, because if you talk too much about the jargon vocabularies, so people will not understand much because they are not in your specific field. Other thing I want to connect with the institute interest, and my interest is I think sometimes I make it confusing, so I trying to figure out it. This is I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So there is a question posted on chat box to Patrick for the FTE. What are some examples of where community letters of a reference could come from?
It's a good question. They can come from anywhere. What we're trying to get at in that question is what your commitment is to your community beyond the academy. We want scholars that transform the world, and that means that aren't just hanging out in the library writing books for other scholars. So we've had everything from pastors to rec center leaders to politicians to really close friends and neighbors. We had one student who does work in their home context, in their home neighborhood, low-income neighborhood, went and interviewed all of their neighbors about their work that they do and kind of running, basically an underground community center through his while he's hosting his doctoral work. So he filmed them and transcribed the interviews and sent them in as his community rec. So I would say that community rec is really supposed to show us that you're not one-dimensional, that you got broader commitments to your community, and that you believe that your scholarship will impact those communities that formed you and support you and frame your work.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I will open quote unquote floor for any questions that you have, both presenters, detailed or general, and overlapping. So here's your chance. Anyone? Stephanie?
I've got a question for either of you about talking with one's institution about having grants or sabbaticals, just in general. I'm an early career scholar, and one thing that's felt different than when I was a doctoral student is that now in a teaching role, I've realized that institutions and other faculty can have kind of complicated feelings about whether they want you to, to get grants to go away. And I think that may depend on the institution and how much they value and how they weight teaching versus research and all that. So can you speak at all to the, I don't know, I guess like the politics of trying to avail oneself of grants or sabbatical opportunities like this without, I don't know, antagonizing one's institution by seeming to not want to be there or not want to focus on teaching? How do you recommend navigating all that?
Ed, do you want to answer this since you offer those grants?
So these are general comments, but I certainly would invite a conversation, maybe not today, but we could set up another time about the specifics. So institutions are many things, and of course they are political communities as well, right? There's power that's going on, and you are all scholars, so you understand the nature of power and wings. So we need to bring those kind of skills and insights to our context as well. Depending on the institution, my experience is that where there's might be reluctance about encouraging outside grants, there might be some concern about how it's going to have a negative effect on the institution. So if that's the concern, part of the strategy is how the external grant will have a positive contribution to make. So to begin thinking about that. Some academic deans or department chairs are wondering how is a course or two courses going to be taught if so-and-so is not going to be present. Depending on the grant, for example, in the Louisville Institute case, project grant for researchers, you can put in the grant a line for someone to teach a course or two if you are going to have course release. That would not be where I would start. I would start to see if the department chair or the dean has funding in his budget for that first. So you get what I'm saying? I'm not saying volunteer that, but if the need's there, that could be put into the budget in some cases. But I guess my approach strategically is to try to discern, try to get out in the open what the concerns are. Because even in a school where they say our focus is on teaching, research benefits teaching, and students benefit from our research. We bring new things into our engagement with the students. So funded research is a positive all around, in my opinion. But as I say, I'm perfectly willing as a former dean to talk to you about the specifics of the political and power dynamics at institutions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Other questions?
Yeah, can I add one thing about from the doctoral side for students who are applying? FT has shifted its policy in this kind of regards in navigating institutions. We previously had, if you were selected as a fellow, for example, or received a grant, we would cut a check directly to your institution. That's still the same in grants, but for fellowships, we work directly with the fellowship recipient. So if you've been awarded a fellowship, FT is in relationship to you. And I mean that sincerely. I will work with your institution. I will tell them, you'll be on the like public, this person received a fellowship, but they don't know how much money you got. It says up to a certain amount. So that's really the politics that you need to navigate. We'll ask to verify that you're a student. That's why we ask for transcripts and all that kind of stuff. But we have really gotten around that. I would also say, as a funder, one of my favorite conversations that I get to have is, because FTE is a third party, we're not in your institution, and I'm not seeking grants. I'm happy to help discern those politics because you know your situation the best, and we don't get to. I'll speak for Ed. We don't get to keep the money at the end of the year. We want this money to go out the door. We need it to get to you, so we will work with you to make sure you have the strongest application. You have what you need to do. In the case of our grants, what we've done for faculty before who are at, if you're at an institution where you don't have a large resource portfolio, say you're at a teaching college. I've written letters that say what great work you're doing to take our mentoring grant. Service. That's still a piece of your tenure portfolio at a teaching college. This is great service you're doing to the broader field in mentoring the next generation of Christian leaders, or whatever you want to say in reflection to that grant. So I would just say those political questions, I mean, that's part of the reason why my staff has a full-time job, is because we are constantly navigating the politics of institutions. And I would say in the last year, because of the pandemic and the changes in higher education, that's only going to exacerbate and get worse as institutions feel the pinch of finances. And this is also to say to doctoral students who are about to apply, a lot of you have in your catalogs that fellowship dollars, especially external fellowship dollars, this might be the same for research, might be the same for sabbatical if it's in your faculty handbook, that it will replace whatever money you receive from the institution. FTE doesn't see us as a financial aid department for higher education. We really see this as an award for the great work that you are doing. So I would say always navigate that with the funder, because what we don't want to have happen is if you apply for the FTE fellowship and you receive $25,000, now all of a sudden the institution is not giving you the aid and support that they had promised you when you were accepted into the institution. So always come to us to have a conversation about how to navigate those politics, because at the end of the day, we are trying to support you in the way that you need to be supported, not in the way that we think should be supported, not in the way your institution thinks should be supported, but the way you want to be supported through your program. So I would just always invite that conversation. We're humans, and like humans, and Dr. Ponte is one of the coolest humans I know. So reach out and have a conversation. That's always the easiest way to do it. And you're not imposing anything. This is what we do for a living.
Thank you. I can assure you that I myself experienced that with both colleagues when I apply for grants too. Questions? Any questions related to applications that you want to know? There is no, bad questions. Any question you have? Ben?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity and for hosting this. Dr. Aponte, I had a question for you specifically about the Postdoctoral Fellowship program that you have. One is very simple. Would you echo what Dr. Reyes said about recommenders being outside of the academy as at least one of the recommenders? And this is more of a specific question, I guess. So the program works with host institutes. I was wondering if there was a network and if the host institute had certain expectations on their own side apart from the Louisville Institute.
Yeah, okay, so let me start with the second part first. So the Louisville Postdoctoral Fellowship, and again, it is intended to be a 2-year visiting faculty position. And I put it that way and it's both in terms of communicating with you as an applicant, but also with the placement institution. So that we are all clear if we're not talking about, and let me put this in virtual quotes, we're not talking about a glorified grants assistant. This is someone who is going to be received as a member of the faculty for 2 years. In the specific negotiations, the term visiting faculty may not be part of the title, because each institution has its own particular policies and procedures, but that is what we're talking about. And so that you, as a Louisville postdoc at a particular school or agency, you are an employee of that school. You're not an employee of Louisville Institute. So in that sense, as employee of a particular seminary, let's say, they have their expectations that they would have for all faculty. And so then that's part of the conversation and the requirements. But in each case, Louisville Institute negotiates a specific memorandum of understanding so that it's clear about particular things and that we are not hopefully caught off guard by anything. So we try to spell that out as much as we can ahead of time. The Louisville Institute postdoctoral placement is a conversation. So if you were selected as a semifinalist, I would talk to you about what kind of school do you want to be at? What are you hoping to teach? Are there certain parts of US or Canada that you would prefer to be at in terms geographically? At any given moment, the Louisville Institute has a list of 40 institutions that we are keeping tabs on who are interested.
That includes ILIF.
Yeah, that's right. That are interested in receiving a Louisville Institute postdoctoral scholar. And so what we try to do is make a match. And before any decisions or commitments are made, we would put you in as a finalist in conversation with the dean and perhaps some of the faculty of the potential placement site, so you can have direct conversations before any decision is made. So that addresses some of the expectations, and we try to get all of that out in the open. Some institutions, placement schools, in addition to the memorandum of understanding that is signed with Louisville Institute, they have particular documents that they require of all employees. So that's something else that we need to have, but it's not across the board. Now, I've talked long enough that I've forgotten your first question. So what was it again?
It was just a question about the application itself. As one of the recommenders, or would you recommend one of the recommenders to be outside of the academy, or is that possible or looked down upon?
It's possible, but if it's someone outside the academy, I would recommend that it's someone who understands the nature of your work in terms of your research or your scholarship, even at this stage, and understands the implication of your work as a scholar teacher for the church, right? So that that kind of recommender has to bring something to the table as well. So that's part of the strategic discernment that you need to do in terms of inviting who's going to be the recommender.
Patrick, do you want to add anything to that? So let me ask a question that on behalf of a participant who says, I sometimes feel a condition of a lacking confidence. Applying a grant needs more courage for me to take the action. Any thoughts to encourage myself, ourselves? So, from reviewing perspectives, how do you notice what this person has confidence or commitment to the communities they're coming from, or the mission of your institution? So what makes an application a confident application? Can you say that? And what do you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I would encourage them, at least for the FTE fellowships and our grant fellowships, to kind of think through impact, like have a sense of what your vision is for what this means in the world, and what it means for the academy. But I think what we see in our applications, if you say, I'm trying to make a difference in, my work is going to make a difference in early Christianity research. Everyone who is doing a dissertation in early Christianity, that's what a dissertation is supposed to do. It's supposed to be new and novel. So what you got to be is be very specific about what that change is going to be or what it adds to the literature. If you're doing grants in communities, mentoring, or like we have an institutional doctoral network with 10 institutions that are working to create conditions for scholars of color to thrive, even deans and presidents, I'm pushing to think about what is your intended impact. It can't just be I'm doing this thing because I think it feels good. It has to be, my impact is going to be that there's going to be more scholars of color coming to this institution. To one of the earlier questions, that we're going to think through what funding looks like for F1 international students that we are actively recruiting to this institution. How do we support them in a better way? So we want to see that folks are actually thinking through impact at the very beginning, or what their intended impact is. That's how, yeah.
So if I may add, not now, but I served as a reviewer of the FTE fellowship selection process. And so every application is strong. But I think what stands out is that whether your application has a coherence, and also getting very strong letters from your advisors or letter writers who know your work well. Be specific is also very helpful. But from my perspective, whether your scholarship is contributing to the bettering of a scholars of color, scholarship of in fact, scholars of color's work in the academy. So some application is strong, and no doubt this person is very smart and doing good work. But what is it to do with FTE's mission? Sometimes I ask the question because people didn't think about how their mission, work is aligned with either your funder's mission. So think about that and know that you are in a doctoral program and you're already good. You made it this far. So Dr. Aponte, there is a question for you. What do you mean by match between a scholar and a school? That what qualities do you consider the most?
So the matching question, let me start by saying at Louisville Institute, we do not believe in forcing anyone to go anywhere they don't want to be. So what's the match? Well, part of the match, for example, is say you are a New Testament scholar. Part of the match is going to a school that wants a New Testament scholar. So part of the match might be that for, say, family concerns, you need to be in a certain part of the country. Say you are in the Atlanta area and you need to be in the Northwest. Well, then part of the conversation and part of the effort at Louisville Institute is that we're going to look at schools in the Northwest and see if there are any that might be interested in receiving a Louisville postdoctoral fellow for 2 years. There are other considerations that might be part of it, and this is why we have lots of conversations. So I'm going to tell you a secret. Not a lot of people know about this, but doing the placement of Louisville postdoctoral fellows takes an extremely great amount of time. It's weeks of conversations and efforts and trying to bring people into direct conversation. And there are many times when I think there might be a match, but then after some conversations between a semifinalist and an academic dean, maybe not so much of that, and that's okay. That's part of the process. So that's what I want to be by the term match. I'm happy to use a different term if that's not helpful, but the idea is that if you go somewhere for a commitment for 2 years, that you are feeling good about that. And the school that is receiving you as visiting faculty for 2 years, that they too are feeling good about that. Let me see, I'll just pause there to see if that answers that question.
April, did you get your answer? Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, April.
There is a question, both FTE and also Louisville Institutes are funded by Lilly. So there is a question privately asked them, I'm asking, if a doctoral student who has received a fellowship from Lilly Endowment from a different institution, would Louisville or FTE will encourage that student to apply for their fellowship? So is there any coordination within Lilly family?
I'll go first, Patrick. We encourage that. We recognize the good work of our colleagues. certainly a FTE, but also a Hispanic Theological Initiative. So all three, particularly for Dissertation Fellowship, we will receive funding from Lilly Endowment. And it has happened that some folks at an earlier stage in their work have received a FTE grant, and then they come to Louisville, say for a dissertation postdoctoral grant. That is fine. Part of our coordination is, how do I place this? So it's possible, not just theoretical, that someone may apply for a dissertation grant with FTE and HTI and Louisville Institute at the same time. And they might be an excellent candidate, but they cannot receive a dissertation grant from all three because the funding is all coming from Lilly Endowment. So there is some coordination there. What Louisville Institute tries to do, for example, is if someone is selected to receive a dissertation grant from both FTE and Louisville Institute, what we encourage people to do is to decline the Louisville Institute dissertation grant and accept the FTE. Now, if you do that, then what Louisville Institute will do is invite you to become a Louisville Institute honorary dissertation scholar. And that way you get the $25,000 grant and all the other benefits through FTE. But in addition, Louisville Institute will invite you to participate in the Louisville Institute annual winter seminar and give you $1,000 for your participation in winter seminar. And you could place on your CV that in addition to being a FTE dissertation scholar, you're also a Louisville Institute honorary dissertation scholar. So that's part of our coordination.
Patrick?
Yeah, I would say, you know, we coordinate to support students in general. I mean, we want to see you thriving in whatever institution you are, and that sort of back end communication does happen. When you come through the application pool, I don't want to deter anyone from applying to Louisville and FT at the same time. One of the benefits of applying for both, whether you receive both or receive none or receive one or the other, or do this where you get an honorary fellowship from one or the other, or get the supports, because we do a similar thing. If someone accepts a different award that they can't take FT's money, you know, there's ways we can invite you to our professional development. But our selection committee is, I mean, boy, that she was on it. I mean, it's a rock star group of scholars of color who are influencers within the academy. And just by them getting their eyes on your work, they're able to do some of that back end networking for you that you are not even aware of is happening.
That's right.
You know, they read your application, they think about you, and when that search comes up, whether you were a fellow or not, they're going to know who's doing research in that area, in that topic. Mm-hmm. This is also to say that there's tons of supports that are absolutely free that you should participate in. So one is, the biggest one that I think both Louisville and FT does is go to the receptions. Meet the folks who work at these institutions, the faculty who receive grants, do the networking that's free and available, because those conversations inform that kind of back-end networking that both happens for the grants and awards, but also for positions, publications, that sort of thing. The other thing is a resource that we just started 2 years ago, which is a writing retreat that we do every single quarter. Absolutely participate in those. I participate. I actually actively participate. I do my own writing. Dr. Aponte's done that. We have alumni, friends, fellows. That is one of the coolest, to me, most intimate kind of gatherings that we do that is virtual, where you're able to connect with folks from every institution kind of in our network. Because we really rely on our network of partners. FTE does. You know, we're not an institution unto ourselves. So like I said, from recruitment all the way through placement, we're working with other folks. So I encourage you to take advantage of the deeper you can build these relationships, the better your vocational journey can be, because you'll have a broader network of support. FTE is never going to say you've gotten too much support. There's not enough support in our field.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. If I may add one more thing, when we read applications, again, I say I'm not on current selection committee, so let me be very clear about that. We know that, school that you are doing your PhD work, have a certain faculty colleagues who are doing really cutting edge work, or Asian American studies work, or you are in an area like Chicago or Berkeley that have other resources, or Atlanta. But when we look at your transcripts and your applications, you have never worked with those colleagues that we respect, but you claim that you are doing the justice of our work of your community. Those kinds raise some red flag to some of us, right? So there is another private question asked. So it's more about the behind the scene question. What's the criteria you use to screen out or narrow down applications in terms of quantitative aspects? So when you have over 100 applications and you narrow down, so what are some of the criteria that you use? I guess, in other words, what makes someone's application so strong that stays to the end?
I will start, and again, we have different grant programs here at Louisville Institute. Let me give the example of dissertation fellowships. So we read all of the applications. Let me just say that. It doesn't matter how many come in, and if it's over 100, and some years it is, we just develop a different process to go through all of them. So we do read all of them. For the dissertation fellowship, one criterion is, has this person applied at the right time? So we do get some applications where the person has just passed their exams and they apply for a dissertation fellowship. And it's clear from the application, both what the applicant has written and, surprisingly, what comes from the letter from their advisor, that it's too soon. They're not going to finish the dissertation within the next year or so. So what we try to do when we have to decline that application is to encourage the person to come back later when it's right. So the Louisville Dissertation Fellowship really is intended for when you're ready to finish the writing, not the day after you passed all your exams. So let me just pause there. I don't know if Patrick wants to respond as well.
I mean, no, we have specific criteria. I can tell you what that is. So when we do our ratings for scholars, we look at 5 categories, or we ask everyone to. So we look at, and we ask every single reader to read through as they're looking through your essays, transcript, recommendation letters, promise as a scholar, promise as a teacher, commitment to community, and commitment to theological education, because that's kind of our other sort of big thing. So those 4 categories are what we rate on 1 to 5. And then we have this other one that's about financial assistance, but we don't actually use that. That's kind of to give us a sense of what's happening in the field with regards to student debt and, what schools are funding what. I would say that our committee is really good at either practicing grade inflation, where everyone gets 5 stars, or the opposite. They're not generous raters. We have our review committee kind of sits in 2 extremes. And so what ends up happening is we take those scores and we bell curve them per category. So we'll have about 50 applications in one group and 50 applications in the other, and we'll bell curve them, because every application that we have gets read by at least 3 scholars. Mm-hmm. After we kind of bell curve them and see where they fall on the whole arc, we look at starting all the way from the least rated one. Did this rating match what the readers really wanted to express about this person's scholarship? And we give the opportunity that no matter where you fall on that bell curve of the rating, that the reviewers have a chance to make the case for why you should get a fellowship. So I would say while those ratings are important, they're really just a starting place for a longer discussion about who makes it into what we consider the cohort of fellows for that year. So if we have 16 fellows, what we're looking for really is who's going to make the best cohort of fellows across that. We want to have cross-disciplinary representation. We want to have mix of institutions, and institutional types. So everything from freestanding seminaries to R1 universities. And then, personally, I've been putting this on our committee the last couple of years, is who's going to make a great alumni. I mean, I'm looking at this screen. Y'all are our future mentors, our faculty members, Louisville grantees, for that for those postdocs and those, and the first book, minority grants, the research grants, the sabbatical grants. And what we want is we want to see great alumni at this early stage so FTE can make strong recommendations to our colleagues about your work. And we really see that as folks who are going to make up that great cohort. And that's also just to say on the selection thing, if you fall outside and you don't receive a selection, sometimes that has nothing to do with how excellent your application was. It could just be that in this year, there was like 10 excellent fellowships from your institution. And that just is, for a funder, it's not good to fund all one institution. We have some other criteria that we have to kind of think about. So anyways, that I would just say that those kind of 4 categories start the conversation, but that's not the be all end all on your rating.
Yeah, I want to, emphasize what Patrick and Ed earlier emphasized: building relationship and be kind. Because the selection committee has all these like Excel sheet, like a tally, that each 5 categories that we mark on each applicant. I remember reading like 70 applications one year, and then going through very methodically tallying, and then FTE they put entire tally together, and then you can see. And then when selection committee meet, they discuss each applicant, and then some the stories that we don't know, that how you are in relationship in your context, that those stories are said, and so therefore maybe this person is not committed to the communities that they are saying that they are committed to. So those things are important. So just this is a behind the scene discussion. So there is a question from David Kwon to Dr. Edwin Aponte. Can you give us a bit more details about Louisville's project grant for researchers and the first book grant? How would they be distinguished from each other, as long as we say that the first book grant is actually open for the second book project, assuming that the first one is based on the applicant's dissertation? What should we highlight to make each of the grants stand out? That was the question.
So let me respond to that. So by talking first about the project grant for researchers. So that grant is intended to help fund research, including research at an early stage of a project. So say you are using ethnography in your methodology and you are just about to go into the field. So that project grant for researchers can fund things that you need to support that. If you need some sort of digital recording device, you can put that in the budget. If you need someone to help collate information that is that it comes from the field, that is fine. For a research assistant, that all of that could be part of a project grant for researcher grant. And so that early work, that same individual may come back a year or 2 later, right? They've done that initial research and now they are ready to write the book that comes out of that earlier research. And so they may apply to Louisville Institute for a sabbatical grant. Or say it's someone at an early stage and they're not eligible yet for sabbatical and they are a person of color, they might apply for the first book grant for a scholar of color. So you may note that the first book grant for scholar of color and the sabbatical grant, they are the same amount, $40,000 for a year. And so the idea is that the first book grant for a scholar of color is a de facto pre-tenure sabbatical grant. It's a very intentional effort on the part of Louisville Institute to support scholars of color And we know that we have all these demands, not only our institutional demands that all faculty have, but other things that are loaded onto us. So that to help support your publication as soon as possible. And so that is some of the difference between the project grant for researcher and the first book grant for scholars of color. That first book grant for scholars of color is to help you get tenure, or if it's a school that does not have tenure, that continuing multi-year contract appointment.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the participant? Puilan?
I want to ask Patrick and Ed to address this question that I think many students or who are in the beginning stage of their academic career are thinking about. That is the impact of the pandemic. Because Patrick, you already mentioned that. I wonder whether in your organizations you have programs to handle mental health of doctoral students. Because of their anxiety, some of our students do not know when they should graduate, given this very challenging job market. And for the Louisville Institute Fellows, after they finished the fellowship, what are the kind of support that the organization may offer if, heavens forbid, that they may not immediately land in a job?
For the Louisville Institute, part of our response in terms of the impact of the pandemic is that we try to reassure everyone that we will be, all our grantees, that Louisville Institute will be as flexible as possible. So with some grantees, like for example, we were just talking about project grant for researchers, they had an end time of when their project would be completed. And so we immediately communicated with everyone, and we've gone back repeatedly and said, it's all right to adjust when your project will be finished. And it's all right to adjust the budget, because the travel that we thought you were going to do, that you thought you were going to do, it's not taking place. So we're trying to be as open and collaborative as possible. Some of the behind the scenes things that Louisville Institute always does, but even more so, is in conversation with institutions about faculty hires, particularly when we're looking at the end of visiting appointments. And Louisville Institute cannot make decisions for institutions, but we can help them think things through and try to be creative in what they can do. And some institutions are responsive in that way. And I know I am being vague because I can't get into some of the details of the conversations that Louisville Institute's having, but let me just assure you that to the degree that Louisville Institute has any kind of influence, we're trying to exert that influence in advocacy for people. And of course, some of you are aware that when it became clear in June that the pandemic was going to be with us a long time, and we saw the financial impact, and particularly on the hiring of new faculty, Louisville Institute wrote a new grant proposal to Lilly Endowment, which was very receptive for it, to try to place 20 additional postdocs. And we did that. We received additional funding, and we did that this fall, and that was additional work. And I recognize it doesn't help everyone, but we're grateful that we could help a few in that regard. So let me just pause there and give Patrick opportunity to respond.
Yeah, I'll take the questions in two parts. One is around the mental health piece. The number one thing, at least for the last 3 years, since I've been kind of formulating the doctoral support, the purpose of our gathering, whether it's virtual or in person, is to reduce isolation. We get back from our mentoring reports, we get reports in the vocational essays that overwhelmingly doctoral students feel isolated in their programs, in their communities. And so our faculty are not doing just professional development. Like, you don't come into a faculty session and it's just, here's how to publish a book, or here's how to write a grant. Disembodied, not caring about who you are. It might as well be a robot talking to you. That's not who FTE is. Our number one goal is to make sure that you find community and connection. So that way we can talk about those particular issues and bring in experts in those fields who happen to be in our network as well to talk specifically about how to address these things during a pandemic. I'll give you an example. So one of our faculty members this last fall, Pamela Lightsey, had a whole session on self-care, and it ranged everything from working with therapists to setting up your space to just taking care of your soul. How do you do that in a pandemic when you're already in an isolating system like the academy, but now she was talking about being confined to a apartment. And what does it mean to give up your, personal space to make it your work desk, your office, your teaching space, to do all this stuff, and how to reclaim it back, because your home space is supposed to be rejuvenating and caring for you. So we try to do that in our professional development support. Those writing retreats that I've said that are open to anyone who wants to attend, they have the same sort of spirit. We care that you're writing, but it's 2 weeks of me saying, I don't care if you're writing. You don't have to write every day to be a writer every day. So, we really kind of focus on holistic support. What is it that FTE can do to make sure you as a scholar in this field are able to do your work, or if you're in a doctoral program, emerge from your work a whole person? And we know that's much more than what I can offer. That really revolves around bringing in a larger swath of resources and community members as people name what's going on with them. Yeah.
And also, I also experienced FT's generosity as a dean, that I had a faculty of color who was a former FT fellow who needed some help. So FT found a life coach for the colleague. So that relationship continues. Other questions? So, we are not on screen, but this year, FT announced about the recipients of research grants, and Dr. Nami Kim, who is on this call, and myself, Dr. Ann Jo, and Dr. Kristen Pei, we collaborated and submitted a grant proposal to Louisville Institute, and we received it. So, those, we are all in far in advance in our career, but also what this means that we got to know each other through Penn as a doctoral students, and that relationship continued. And we are in 4 different institutional contexts, but we collaborated a research project together. So when you think about grant proposal, that not just your individual grant proposal, but you can also collaborate and make a probably bigger impact through your collaboration. So that's another way that you can think about for your future applications. Any other comments and questions? We still have some minutes left. And don't be shy. And if you don't want to ask the question, as some people did, send the question to me and I will ask them for you. If not, I invite. Okay, so please.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your experience about collaboration. And I'm just curious that if that collaboration also work for you as a theologian, but another faculty actually from philosophy. And is it possible for us to apply for a collaboration work to Louisville, for example? Yes.
At Louisville Institute, we love collaboration. So we've done that, and this reminds me that if you have a particular idea for a project that might be funded, is to check our database. You can do that through a search on the website, and you'll be able to see that there have been many collaborative projects that are on. And I know I showed my slides quickly, but one of the illustrations was a collaborative project among 3 Roman Catholic theologians of color. And one of the things that they're doing in their shared project is not only are they Roman Catholic theologians of color, but they also are directly addressing LGBTQ issues, which is a very courageous thing to do in their context. And so Louisville Institute was delighted to fund that collaborative project. So we're open to it, and you can see some of the examples of collaborations we've done in the past.
I'm aware of that project too, yes. Yeah, Dr. Craig Ford book, yes.
That's right, that's right.
Yes, right.
Thank you. Other questions? We have about 10 minutes left. If not, Patrick and Ed, do you have any final comments and recommendations, suggestions, or anything that you want to share with us?
I guess my encouragement is that, yes, the money and the funding is good, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, I think, the relationships that we developed. And you notice I say that even above the research is important, and that's part of our calling, and the research and publication. But it's really, I think, our research, our publication, our teaching becomes all the better in the relationships that are developed. As I mentioned, I am still in conversation with colleagues that I met when I was a doctoral student at FTE. And let me mention one, Miguel Diaz, in that project that I just mentioned. Miguel is at Loyola University in Chicago. We met while we were doctoral students. And through the years, we've kept up, and we celebrated when Miguel was appointed by President Obama as the US ambassador to the Vatican. And now he's back in the United States and doing his work. And it's those relationships that I think enrich everything. And if along the way, in the providence of God, we can get funding from somewhere to do work together, all the better. So I encourage you to be in relationship with each other as you do your work, as you fulfill your callings as scholars and teachers.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to this is that I really see this as collaborative work, or this is shared work, shared sacred work across the institution, across partnerships. And someone in my position, I don't know what I can't see or who I don't meet. And I try to meet as many people as possible. And for those of you who know me on the call, I'm like on 11, you know, my energy level is always up here, and I'm super excited about what people are doing. And I want to be excited about your work, but I can't know that if I don't know you. And so this goes all the way through what Ed says, from your entire vocational career. I work with a bunch of faculty members who were not FT fellows. Myself, I was not an FT fellow. I mean, part of it is advancing the work in the mission of this organization. And for me personally, as a scholar of color, as you know, only the second person in my family to get a degree in anything, only graduate student, that I'm advancing this on behalf of my people, and I need to make space so that way I'm not just the first, I'm not the last. And so I'm trying to work with folks and build a movement within the academy, which is really hard because this is a stubborn system. So that invitation is open. So when you see open invitations that don't just require a fellowship or an application or all that stuff that has a yes or no, but like just come as you are, say yes. It's cool. Like our writing calls are really, really cool. And you are more than welcome. And also I would just say, as a FT, I know not all foundations are like this, and maybe this is unique to the Lilly thing, but the folks within Louisville and myself, everyone in FTE, we want to talk to you whether or not you are eligible for a fellowship or not. So shoot me an email, call me, hit me up on Facebook. I really don't care how you get in contact with me. I want to know who you are, and I want to be in relationship with you. I want to know what your work is. So that way, when those opportunities come through my pipeline, I know I have solid people that I can recommend and can, you know, wholeheartedly say, I know this person and what they do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, you know, please give applaud to both of these colleagues who are so committed to enhancing Scholars of Color's work. Thank you so much. And I reiterate what both Dr. Ponte and Dr. Reyes said, that, you know, don't be hesitant. If you don't feel like you're reaching out to them directly, reach out to some of us, Panaram ATSI mentors, so that we can also, you know, break that relationship for you. So please don't think that you are alone here. Thank you again, and I hope that you have a great weekend.